Hey.
I think, Matt, you're pulling up, there it is. Okay, Haya,
I wasn't sure when I was on.
I think you're on.
Okay, can you go ahead, Matt, and just put everything on the screen there? Thank you so much. I'm Haya Berman Hakim. I was a member of the committee. So the Somerset Stormwater Committee began its work in November 2020. We were tasked by the mayor to define problems associated with stormwater runoff and to analyze the efficacy, costs, and benefits of possible solutions. So we got together and organized an inclusive process to gather information and prioritize key issues. Is that the last one, Matt? I feel like there's one more. And then to gather information, prioritize key issues, and then to develop recommendations. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are just some highlights. Before we get into the meat of it, I just want to give you some highlights. We sent out a survey to the town about stormwater. We've had monthly meetings since the inception. We have had 2 forums. This is the second one for the town. We've had 5 articles in the town journal. We developed a new town code that was was enacted in December of last year to make some changes in stormwater regulations. We engaged the Low Impact Development Center for expertise. We had a rain gardens and more tour in September, and we all got to see each other's installations. We made a final report of 78 pages, I am told, and it is purposely in bold. Also, with the report, we put in a resource guide, which can help homeowners figure out their way through all of this. And we went from total ignorance to thought leadership. And by that, we mean that we are now, other towns are coming to us with questions. So we are we've sort of become some experts in the matter. Thank you. Next slide. I think it's Ellen, is that now?
Ellen, you have to unmute.
I have this, the agenda. Am I supposed to go through that? I think it's the next slide. Yeah, there you go. The big ideas. So I just want to take a moment. So if you end the evening with no other thoughts, I hope a couple of the thoughts will be that Somerset has too much water and too little storage. And by too much water, what we mean is we have hills, we have loss of trees, we do not have great soil, we have climate change, and we have way too much water. And we are not storing the water on our properties. And often what happens is people are rerouting the water off their properties into the streets and into the sidewalks and into neighbors. Next, okay. And so we want you to think about changing how you think about stormwater and how Somerset should change its behavior and in a paradigm shift. And one of the important points we want to make is that we believe that we can work together for the common good and do a lot to solve the problem. Next. Okay, I think I did that one.
No, this is this.
So let's talk about what we mean. Let's actually see visually what we mean about too much water. This is Julie Greenberg. And we're going to watch a video that was taken just before the committee started its work, September 10th, 2020, showing water flowing through a backyard on the south side of Dorset. There should be sound from this. Imagine a lot of gurgling and,
We don't hear sound, Matt.
but well, let's all just imagine the gurgling from this water. That's runoff just going down the hill. And there are multiple backyards where this is what you'd see. If you noticed in our report, we described how one family used to have its kids go down the hill in inner tubes. So now that you have that picture in your mind, let's talk about how much water we have running off each and every lot. And Matt, if you could, this really should just advance through all the text, and then I'll look at that swimming pool and visualize that that swimming pool, we're not completely full, maybe only 3.5 feet of depth and that's about 7,660 gallons of water. And that's the amount that comes off in runoff in a storm that happens about once a year, about 2.6 inches of rain, from an average sized lot in Somerset with an average sized impervious footprint from the house and the garage and the driveway, patio, whatever. That's a lot of water from each and every lot, and that doesn't even count runoff off the streets. Next slide. This photo shows the storm drain system in Somerset. Those red lines are the storm drains. And you can see, first of all, we don't have really an adequate storm drain system. It's pretty small for a community this size. But all of those storm drains, even though you can't see where they end up, they collect the water and deposit water in local waterways. And until 2010, every house in this community connected in some way to this storm sewer system, either directly or with street drains. The water went into the waterways, and it's degraded them quite a bit. Now, after 2010, there was some county regulation, and that required storage. Storage, what we mean is retaining water on site in rain gardens, permeable driveways, dry wells for a couple days before, while it infiltrates, it's lifted by trees, it just doesn't run off the surface. So it's new and growing in Somerset. We find storage on lots where there's post 2010 new homes, or there are people in town who've installed rain gardens, especially permeable driveways, by choice. And we actually have quite a bit of that in town relative to other parts of the county, but we need more. Next slide. And this is what storage looks like. That rain garden that you're seeing is in my front yard. And what you're looking at is a photo of how much water was left in it after an overnight rain.
Sorry.
And you can see that it's almost absorbed. It's going to be gone in another couple hours. What we need is more storage like this, or in dry wells or other devices, other installations called green infrastructure. We don't want to jeopardize foundations and vegetation. But here's the bottom line. When we add new impervious surface in town, we also need to add storage capacity for the runoff from rainfall on that new impervious surface. Next slide.
Oops.
So are there any questions?
You can also put them in the chat and we can read them out loud. If you want to be anonymous. And there'll be other opportunities for questions.
let's just move on and
Yeah.
every time.
Other opportunities for questions throughout and then at the end.
Okay, whoops. So this is back to me, Haya Berman Hakim. I'm going to talk a little bit about our resource guide and a little bit, there will also be someone who talks about rain plan in particular. Next slide, please, Matt. Okay, so what can residents do? Stormwater runoff impacts not just our property and our neighbor's property, but also the environment. It's just not good for the waterways. And there is a range of green infrastructure, types of green infrastructure to collect stormwater runoff. And I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. The committee has developed a resource guide to green infrastructure, which is already posted on the town's website to give guidance to individuals what to do on their own lots to manage stormwater. Next slide. Thank you. So what is green infrastructure? Here are some examples. We have conservation landscaping, bioretention practices, French drains, permeable pavers, tree planting. For rooftop runoff, we have dry wells and rain barrels, and then rain gardens can collect both rooftop and overland runoff. And all of these are explained in detail in the resource guide. Let's look at the next slide. We have a couple of pictures. Thank you. So here's two examples in Somerset. On the left, we have a conservation landscape, and on the right, a permeable paver driveway. And there are a lot of those in Somerset. And we also can have patios, etc. Next slide. So here are some of the resources for green infrastructure, and these are also in the resource guide. Montgomery County Rainscapes is a Montgomery County program. They can do virtual site assessments, help with project planning and design, and give you guidance on selecting professionals trained in use of green infrastructure. They have an excellent website, and Rainscapes offers rebates up to $7,500 per parcel to owners who install pre-approved projects. So if you get your project approved, then you can get some money back, and that can help a lot to defray costs. Next slide, please. We also have two other websites to recommend. Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional is they're a local organization that trains and certifies professionals in stormwater control methods. Their website has general information on stormwater management, and they also have a list of certified professionals by specialty, so it's very helpful. And then Arlington County, Virginia, our neighbors just across the river, have an excellent website with a ton of information, a useful guide to stormwater solutions, and it applies to us as well. Next slide, please. Finally, we have our rain plan, which is another resource. We are going to, I'm going to hand it over to the president of Rain Plan, Greg Conito, who will tell us a little bit about what Rain Plan can do for you.
Thank you. This is Greg Conito, and I appreciate being an opportunity to just give a little intro to Rain Plan and how we can support Somerset in your goals and objectives. Next slide, please. We worked with under the Low Impact Development Center to develop what we call the water balance for Somerset, and this is a feature on property owner dashboards that's free to access for any property owner. The purpose of Rain Plan is to empower property owners to better understand their property characteristics and how water, when it falls on your property, what the best type of practice is. As previously described to you, these technologies are fairly new. The regulations for them are new. Contractor industry is getting smarter and smarter about the more efficient way to install them. But a big proponent is the characteristics of your property is needed to understand your soil types, how much impervious, so you can best fit the technology to help capture and retain, or at least capture, retain, and release slower so that you don't have those large volumes of water flowing through and collecting with other neighbors' runoff. So this widget is an example of a Somerset property that if you access, that can allow you to look at some of the technologies. It'll give you information about your lot size, how much impervious surface you have, your infiltration's permeability rate, and based on we're now modeling, we have to update the logo or update the signature, model on a 2.6-inch storm, the number of gallons, and what installing one of these technologies, how much water will that balance on your property? How much water will you take out of the flow during a rain event, as was shown in the previous picture of a rain garden, so as to reduce the amount of volume? And this problem is a big problem, as you can see, but it's a complex problem. And rain plan is set up to help you better organize and plan your project before you go about connecting with contractors, so you can be at a higher level of knowledge when you speak to contractors to assess whether they're capable of accomplishing the specific technology you have for your problem, as well as help with sourcing the capital funding and help relieve some risk as a property owner who's trying to navigate these types of solutions. And so we really appreciate and applaud the Stormwater Committee for their progressive approach for providing getting so much data at a parcel level for their constituents or for their fellow residents to be able to start assessing what activities property owners could take, and also what resources and education and also funding they can get, like the Rainscapes programs or other types of incentive programs that government have to incentivize you to kind of address water where it falls. Thank you. This is a quick overview of how the rain plan process works. Property owners, you're able to put your address in. We have a questionnaire of some onboarding about your specific challenges on your property that only you would know. We call that your water story. It will spit out a rain plan, which has some recommended technology. It also searches for any incentives that are currently and is constantly being updated, any incentives that are available for your product in your area. And then we have what we call is a rain viewer. It's a 1-inch level view of your property that is flown over by planes, that is updated on a semi-annual basis. So it's a pretty recent photo, but we can go down to a very crisp view of your image, and we will do a planning assessment with you so you can identify specifically where those areas are, and we can help you create an image of your problems that you can use for an RFP with contractors. Again, get you as educated as possible. And that's free of service for you to use. If you decide to move forward with Rain Plan, we'll source bids for you on your specific problem and organize those bids so you can compare and make a selection if you want to move forward with a project. And we also pre-fund your projects and give a 24-month interest-free payment, so it's more affordable for you to be able to take action and address these issues, since a lot of these issues are more of a burden that are just due to the ever-increasing climate and environment and surrounding infrastructure. And that's just a quick overview of how the Rain Plan has been set up to try to empower and enable private property owners to take action and be able to address stormwater challenges unique, specific to their property, and kind of do that for their property, but also help their local neighbors and their community. Thank you.
Do folks have questions?
Yes, if I may speak.
Yep.
Okay. Rain plan. So you guys have made wonderful work, and I want to admit that personally I've been delaying doing things here because at first I knew too much and I realized I didn't know enough. And when I went to contractors, nobody was doing what I thought you could be doing. And the first thing is that nobody including places like American Plant, wanted to calculate what we needed by like in terms of water features. And that really bothered me up to the point that I just left it all and I just said, so I kind of very grateful to see where you are. And part of dealing with my water at home is also kind of looking with, what the landscape architecture I will want. So I'm really curious, this rain plan thing kind of puzzled me a little bit. What is it? It's an organization that gives us for free. It's a startup. It's just like, I'm puzzled by the concept, which I think it's a great service for us, but who are you?
So very simply.
Can you tell us more a bit?
Yes. So very simply, can you hear me? I wasn't sure if I was breaking up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So very simply, we are a startup. We are a commercial
Okay.
business and we are a startup. The
Yeah.
origins of the startup is that there is 1.2 trillion square feet of impervious surfaces in the country, in the United States. It's about 25 million acres of impervious surfaces, and 80% of those impervious surfaces, about 850 billion plus, are on private property. The majority of all the work that gets done is on the public right of way, and the public right of way of the streets only comprises about 20% of the impervious surfaces in the country. So as a business, we identified our background has been doing infrastructure work in green infrastructure and social infrastructure. We decided to start a business that focused on private property retrofits, voluntary retrofits.
Just, you know, and
Mhm.
I'm totally with you there. I guess that's not what I'm
Okay.
looking for. It's like, are you a Montgomery County business? How are you finding local contractors? Are you like from
So-
California and trying to find contractors
No.
here? Can I just go in and try to find what I want and then take it from there? Which is something
Yes.
I
So-
want, you know, so that's
Yes.
my.
Yeah, so we are a Montgomery County-based business. We're actually up in Pike and Rose. We have an office in Pike and Rose, and we have an office in Dulles, Virginia. But we're a national technology company that has developed a database of aggregated all the incentive programs and continue to aggregate all the incentive programs that are available in Montgomery County, DC, and across the country
Okay.
related to stormwater for private property
Perfect.
owners.
I'm
Can I
all with
interrupt
you.
for a minute here? Excuse me, I'd like to draw a connection and then we'll go back to the question. Let me just, I think, answer a little bit more broadly the connection to the Low Impact Development Center, which I think incubated, if I'm understanding, a RAIN plan. And RAIN plan is accessible it's a free service. It is a startup, but what you saw in terms of that water balance is accessible to all Somerset residents. There
Okay.
is a myrainplan.org, I believe is the URL.
Okay.
And if you access that and set up an account, you can see for your property in Somerset, all that information and the water balance.
And is that for a limited time?
Pardon?
No, it's for free. Just I can explain
That's
very.
for
I apologize. I'll be very succinct. MyRainPlan.com. All of the planning and organizing of getting your rain plan is free to you to develop. We help you by providing based on your filling out what incentives and technology.
Okay.
You can download it. You can use it. We only services we charge is if you decide to move forward with a project and decide to hire us to support
Okay.
you with doing and funding your project. Otherwise, all the features are free and not for a limited time. So
Not for a limited time. So my second thing, I want to congratulate the committee for having put more resources than Montgomery County, because everybody I've contacted, anyway, for me, it didn't really work. So I'm happy. I'm going to be very curious of looking at Chesapeake Bay landscape, you know, etc. But I'm just curious from rain plan and from the committee's point of view, what are you seeing in contractors and local landscapers, landscape designers in wanting to, you know, go that way with us? You know, I mean, this is why I'm myself, you know, thinking I'm going to plan it all. Then I'm going to go to someone. But are there someone that can come and say, hey, that's, you know, start from the beginning instead of me having to do it? Like when I hire an architect to redo my kitchen, for example. Are you finding people like this or not?
I can just say on the rain plan side, we are actively sourcing.
No, from the committee's
I'm
point
sorry.
of view.
Yeah, Julie
you
or
seeing that
Haya,
people
you
are
want to answer
able
that?
to do it unless they put hours and hours into it.
Yeah. Julie, you want to take that?
At this point, I would say that rain plan appears to have the most integrated approach to this.
Thank you.
And,
Okay.
but, you know, we feel that the resources available, you might have a different conceptual sort of umbrella under which all this is going to fall.
Yeah.
Other people might want to just do individual projects. So I think what's Hyatt presented is a range that will fit everybody's unique household needs for what they're interested in doing. Yeah.
Okay, and the only thing I will say is once we all get into this locally, it might be like the lawnmower that we need to start educating the local big landscapers on And I'm sure you guys, with all the work you've done, that's just your report is a piece of education, but not only to other towns, but people that can service the people who want to do something.
Yeah.
And to see the reluctance that I've had, even in applying to Rainscape, I was like, this is American plant. You know, I'm actually willing to go to you. And then their answer is get like, well, we don't want to touch this anymore. It was very disappointing. And I'm just hoping that I know you are thought leaders. I think the more and more town that will get into it, the landscapers will have no choice. But
Thank you. That's great.
you know, I think there's going to be a piece of it in
And
there.
afterwards,
Anyways,
you
my 2
can,
cents there, but
yeah, you know, we
thank
can,
you again.
yeah, I wanted, thanks so much for your questions. I think you were asking what everybody was sort of thinking. And so thank you so much. And we can stick around afterwards and really dig down. I kind of want to move us along a little bit because we have a lot more to cover. So let's go to Ed next.
Oh, before you do that,
Oh.
Phil Young had a question.
Oh, sorry, I did not see that.
Phil, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes?
I'll start my video so you can see me also. So yeah, Ellen, thanks very much for letting me ask this question. I'd just like to start by saying that I am in favor of the town's stormwater mitigation efforts. The extensive work done by the Stormwater Committee is extremely impressive. In particular, I applaud everyone who has helped to revamp the town's building code, since I think this is one of the best ways to help prevent stormwater problems from worsening. I have a few questions broadly focused on 2 areas. One is the impact of stormwater mitigation efforts on the town budget, and the second is on the location of stormwater projects that is on private and public lands.
Phil,
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I think your question is more appropriate for the last presentation, because right now we're just talking about rain plan and stuff. So can you
I
hold
can-
that question till the end?
Sure, I'm happy to hold it. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, thank you. So I think the next one up is Ed.
All right, good evening, everyone. So Phil provided a nice segue to talk about the committee's recommendations for amendments to what really is the existing stormwater code for Somerset. Matt, if we can go to the next slide. So let me just say up front that, thinking about construction, the impact of construction on stormwater management, on the stormwater problems that we have, trying to get a handle on that to assess the nature and degree of the problem, and then to think about the fixes. That was really a major focus of the committee, perhaps not surprisingly to any of you. These are complex problems, and it was helpful to us at the beginning of the process to think about what are our goals? What are going to be our guiding principles in thinking about what we should recommend that the town adopt by way of a stormwater code. So we really identified 5 of them, and I'll say, well, we identified some and they evolved over time the more we continue to think about these issues. Number 1 is effectiveness. If we were going to recommend the town adopt a stormwater code, it needs to be effective. And by that, I mean, and the committee means, that it needs to succeed in achieving the aims of the committee and the aims of the town and having a code at all. Number 2, it needs to be reasonable in scope. And not surprising, we spent a lot of time thinking about what's reasonable, what's too much, what's not enough. And at the end of the day, it was a balancing test and thinking about costs and benefits. And ultimately, we were guided by, I think, a single principle, and that is, how much do we need to impose on applicants? What do we need to impose on applicants for the code to be effective? By applicants, I mean those applying for a building code in Somerset. What will we impose on them? And what would be too much? What would be a constraint that is just too much, that is too unreasonable? So we were seeking reasonableness, effectiveness, but not being any more onerous or restrictive than is really required to do the job. Third, we thought about practicality, and we thought about practicality from two perspectives. One, it needs to be practical for the applicant, for the homeowner. So for someone who's building a new home or for an existing resident who's doing a renovation, they have to be able to work with the code. It's got to be manageable. They have to be able to, through reasonable efforts, meet the requirements that the town has imposed. But it also had to be practical from the town's perspective. This is a point I'll touch on it again in just a minute. We're a small town. We don't have unlimited resources. And so, there are more elaborate, complex code schemes that we consider, and ultimately we discarded them because it's just not workable for our town. Fourth, and this is a key principle in what we've recommended, and that is that applicants need to engage early in the process with the town of Somerset. What happens now is applicants go to the county, they apply for a building permit, the county considers their stormwater plan, they typically grant a waiver, and then the town is stuck with the aftermath of that. What we didn't want to happen is applicants go to the county, they apply for a building permit, they move along in the process, they later enter the process with the town, and then lo and behold, they learn that we've got our own requirements. So they've got, the applicants have to engage early with the town. And last, we wanted the code to focus on all relevant construction. What is relevant construction? Well, it's construction that is likely to have a material impact on stormwater management. So that was a key consideration for us. All right, why don't we go on to the next slide? I already touched a little bit on this, but we face some challenges in thinking about what are the code provisions that we should recommend. Number one, we are going to have new construction. Number two, our rainfall is going to continue to intensify because of global warming. We are going to get more rain. Number three, this is a community-wide problem. And it's a long-standing problem in Somerset. And new construction, while it being a contributing factor, it's not remotely the only contributing factor. And our goals in recommending what really are amendments to, with respect to construction, new construction, were to have in place a code that would help the town mitigate the effects of stormwater going forward. We've got significant problems now. We wanted the code to be effective in mitigating new effects going forward that resulted from new construction. Next, I see we've got one, and one. So they're all equally important and priority here. We're a small town, I mentioned that. And lastly, we could just go back for a second, Matt. The last point I'm going to make here is we were surprised to find there are very few helpful examples among jurisdictions around the country. What we have done here is unique. And I think our experts at LIDC would confirm, this is probably, if it's not the most forward-thinking, innovating program that we've developed here, it's certainly one of them. There just aren't that many towns, and there weren't that many town codes that we could look to as effective models. So to some extent, we were really creating the wheel here in devising our code recommendations. Let's go to the next slide. So there has to be new construction. Now, I think the general category here is what construction activities are going to fall within the scope of the code. So number one, we already have in place code provisions that we had worked with the council on. Those were adopted in December of 21, December of last year. Though the code currently only applies to new home construction. And the standard for new home construction that is applied is that there must be a way to store on the property the rainwater that is equal to a one-year storm event. A one-year storm event. That means 2.6 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. That's the same standard that the county has in place. The problem is the county doesn't apply the standard, and they routinely grant waivers. So we just took the standard the county has in place and baked it into the code that we recommended and that the town adopted. So also in the current code is a provision that requires that applicants for a town permit must apply before they seek permit approval from the county. So we already have in place this process of getting the applicant in early with the town of Somerset. And the purpose of that is to have an informational meeting to educate the applicant about both runoff and tree preservation. So we've got that in place now. What we're proposing is that the code provisions would apply to renovations as well. That's not currently covered by the code. The standard that we adopted and that we've recommended to the town is that renovations adding 150 square feet or more of impervious surface must store runoff equal to a 1-year storm event. That is runoff from new surface that is created. How do we come up with a 150 square feet? Well, that's roughly the size of a room addition to a house, or if someone is adding a significant patio. And this goes back to the principle of, what is reasonable. We decided not to apply this, not to require that someone who wants to put up a shed, develop a plan and submit it to the town. But if you're doing something more significant than that, like a material renovation or a patio, you will fall under the code provisions that we're recommending. Next slide, please. So if you fall under the code as we've recommended in our proposal, what do you have to do? What will the applicant be required to do? One, well, you've got to meet the 1-year storm event standard. Two, we discovered during the process of figuring out and trying to understand the problems in Somerset that downspouts that are directed onto neighbors' properties is a major contributing source of stormwater problems. And this is a significant problem in the town. So we are recommending a provision that would require that for new construction, for both renovations and new homes, that downspouts cannot direct water onto a neighbor's property. We would think that's pretty non-controversial, and it will be helpful. Two, in order to get a variance, so we expect there will be variances, but the applicant will have to demonstrate that it made a good faith effort to comply to meet the standard that's baked into the code. Number three, if an applicant is going to get a variance of more than 20%, meaning that they will not be able to store 20% or more of the stormwater that the new impervious surface is contributing on the property, that they're going to have to pay a fee, and the fee is equal to $30 a cubic foot of water that they are not storing on the property. That could be a significant amount for a large home being developed if a variance of 20% of more than 20% is required. I mean, it could be in the tens of thousands of dollars, but we thought this was appropriate, an appropriate trade-off and a benefit to the town if the town is going to allow someone to dump their stormwater on the street or possibly a neighbor's property. Number four, so we recommend the town should have developed clear guidance to assist applicants in analyzing storage needs and how to meet them. Number five, we recommend that in connection with a condition of approving an application is that the applicant enter into a maintenance agreement. What is a maintenance agreement? A maintenance agreement is an obligation for the homeowner to maintain whatever facilities they've added onto their property to store rainwater, stormwater. So for example, if they have dry wells on their property, they're going to have to maintain them. So that's an important part of the program. Dry wells fill up, they become ineffective. This is necessary, and it's what other towns do. Lastly, inspections are required to make sure that whatever facilities like dry wells homeowners have put on their property are functioning. And if they're not functioning, then the homeowner will be asked to clean out the dry well or take whatever other steps are required to make the facility functioning. That's it. Any questions? Let me just say, while we're waiting for questions, it's a lot. That's a very high level overview. It's pretty technical, There's a lot of information about the proposed code provisions in the report. So if you're interested, review the report, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Oh, I have a question. So like for the variances and like showing a good faith effort, I'm trying to think how to say this. So you can put in a good faith effort by still having like a very, very, very large house that you want to have constructed. So where does that level change where like you might have to change the size of your house to be smaller? And, you know, I guess I'm just a little bit confused about how we would really decide that and implement that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And, you know, I will tell you, we considered different kinds of limitations, like on square footage of impervious surface. We decided not to go that route for a number of reasons. Certainly, I think that the town would be well within its rights, and some of the town lawyer will have to weigh in on this, but would be well within its rights to impose design changes, as the council's already done in one example that many of us are familiar with. So imposing design changes is certainly within the town's right. Could the town say, you know, I would invite others from the committees to weigh in. I would think that the town would be well within its rights if someone is seeking a variance of more than 20% to say, I'm sorry, we've suggested all these options for you to come within the limitation, or at least come down under 20%, and you've refused to do them. The alternative is you've got to shrink your house. I mean, but, you know, I would think that, and this is going to be the council's decision, obviously, but if an applicant has really, really tried, you know, moved a driveway, preserved trees, used impermeable materials on all surfaces that are possible, put in, put in rain barrels, done all of that, and they're still not meeting it, I think that's a good faith effort, but I'm not going to be the decision maker.
Mhm.
Didn't we have something about swimming pools? If there was a problem with that, then we just said you couldn't have it or something? Someone remind me what that was.
We have
do.
recommended that if a variance just can't be granted in a situation in which an in-ground swimming pool is part of the design and is essentially aggravating all of the runoff problems between covering up potential sources of infiltration and also generating more runoff. So that's just a blanket situation in which we would recommend that the council just say, this is incompatible. In-ground swimming pools and variances are incompatible.
You know, let me say one more thing in response to the question, which is a good one. You know, what we learned in speaking with other towns, like the town of Chevy Chase, is that it's really a negotiation between the town and the applicant. And in most cases, at least if Chevy Chase is a good example, they're able to work out an agreement and they figure it out. And a variance is granted, hopefully it's not something too significant, you know, and a decision is made. I would think that over time that the decision maker, presumably it's going to be the council, is going to develop kind of a body of experience and knowledge and expertise in knowing how far to push an applicant and to know when an applicant is really making a good faith effort and when they're not.
And I would add one last thing, and then I think we should move on. This is an important issue. One of the elements of our recommendations that Ed brought up was this early engagement. And one aspect of that early engagement is bringing more information to the table early. So another aspect of the committee's recommendation is that soil tests and assessments of all trees on the property be brought to the table at the informational meeting that the town staff has with an applicant for a new home construction project. That wouldn't be necessary for a renovation. But that information, if the soil is suitable for dry wells and the applicant then comes in with a request for a variance, well, that's a clear case where the variance has been necessitated by overbuilding. Because if there's soil can sustain dry wells, then all of the rooftop runoff should be held by dry wells, unless the property is amazingly small, in which case the house has to be amazingly small as well. So that information in hand earlier will allow the town to make better judgments about what is good faith here. How much good faith was demonstrated in the design? You have to get ahead of the design though.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add, at the end of the day, you council members are our elected officials, and that, we are entrusting you to implement whatever code there currently is and or new proposed code that passes, and to do what you think is best faith. And, to Ed's point, that you'll develop some body of knowledge over time. But, this is where the council really ends up deciding. Thank you.
David
I have-
Caithlin had a
Yeah.
question. David, are you still there?
I am.
Go ahead.
So I have two questions. One is, we've been talking about good faith effort. Is there a legal definition, in the code for that? And then the second question is, what has been the experience of applying the code thus far this year since it went into place in December of 21?
Yeah, those are good questions. We have not recommended, well, we do have in the report actually suggested, I wouldn't call it a definition of good faith, but steps that the homeowner should demonstrate it has taken in order to satisfy the good faith standard. So that is in our report. With respect to the experience so far, I think I might defer to Julie Greenberg on that, who worked, closely with the council, some of the members of the council on one property in particular.
And it's
But-
only been one, and the council, I think.
Yeah,
I think did the best job it could to sort through a new standard and really try to hold the applicant to it. Took 3 hearings, and I think the result was it was a win for the town in terms of achieving more stormwater management than would have been certainly achieved by the county's 100% waiver. So there is more storage, but it's not as long-term as we would want on that property. Some of the things that came out in that interaction with the applicant and the town council led to some of the recommendations for tweaks of the town code that we are now recommending in the final report. So we'll live and learn as we move through these permit applications. And I'm sure it's going to age some of the town council members a bit more than they want to be aged. But we really appreciate their efforts on this.
Next, I think, Neil, are you here?
Let me unmute myself. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Finally, my audio works on with your system. I've been waiting for a year for that to happen. So thank you. First, I'd like to thank the town for bringing us on board. This is my staff and I. It's a really great project. It's a lot of fun to do. It was educational for us, as well as, and I really, it's amazing how you guys have worked together to help pull all this together. Are you going to pull the screen up so I can do the slides?
Yeah, Neil, could you just explain who you are for people who?
Oh, sorry about that. So I'm the executive director of the Low Impact Development Center, and we're an NGO. Then we do work across the country, and we've done work for my good friend Jeff Lapover, who used to be at EPA, who I see is on the call this evening. How you doing, Jeff? And we look at kind of sustainable solutions for stormwater management and help communities anywhere to things like Berwyn Heights and for College Park to, the District of Columbia to the town of Somerset, and help them with codes, ordinances, and technical solutions. don't see the presentation popping up.
Sorry, bear with me one
Sure.
moment.
Everyone could take a deep breath.
For whatever reason, it went back to the beginning for me, so I'm just having to furiously click through the.
I have to probably also leave a little bit after 8:30, so I am pretty accessible and I'll answer your emails, and you can get that from Julie or Ellen or Matt, anybody on the committee. Great. So I just have 3 quick slides to show. One thing is we started off, we took the county's GIS system, geographic information system, and it has very good land use coverage. And can you just go down to the next slide? Just real quick. So what we did is we made a little stormwater model. So when Greg was talking about the gallons of runoff and some of the committee members were before, we took that land use coverage, which is trees, impervious areas, and each property, we determined those amounts. And from that, we did a rainfall runoff calculator. So, and that was further refined by the rain plan. So you can tell exactly what's coming off your property and how many gallons of water it generates in a rainstorm. And we can look at anybody, it's all public record. And that was one of our deliverables. So if you can go back to the next slide, Matt, please. And so we did is we used that, and we looked at, we did a desktop analysis of about half the town because our budget was limited. And we used the results of the survey, and we identified some areas where we thought we could do some green infrastructure, some things, some rain gardens, some maybe some minor bioswales, and just kind of conceptualize where things could go for those couple of blocks that we looked at. And you can see here these colors correspond to drainage complaints. And if you read the report, I don't want to get into it much. You can see there's a pretty big cause. It's pretty evident in many places where there are problems and what is generating them. And next slide. And then we took it one more slide. And we looked at, for example, the drainage patterns and a little bit more engineering detail. And this one is like kind of more of a hybrid solution. But for those blocks, we said, you know, maybe you could, where you saw that river, help slow some of that down, that water down, and infiltrate some of that water in a bioswale or another type of device. So these are conceptual things. And we found a couple dozen locations, I think 1 to 2 dozen, where these kind of could cross properties and where residents could work together on a kind of a solution and maybe have some joint facilities. So those are the 3 slides, and there's much more detail and much better description in the report that you can download offline. So anyway, did anyone have any questions, or do you want to hold that for a little bit? We can stick around for a little bit longer.
Does anybody have any questions?
So the important point of this is that demonstrate that there are potential solutions. And if you can look at the maps and say, hey, let's take a little bit more in-depth look at these locations and see if we can put in a rain garden, or see if we could do some woodland, some tree conservation, or native landscaping to help reduce some of the drainage issues.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
You're welcome.
It looks like we have one question, Veronique Marie.
Yes, to Neil, thank you. And then to the committee, these maps where you have, I live on Essex, but the other part of Essex, are those in the report?
I can answer that, yeah. If you can just hold off, I'm getting to the next section and I'll
Well,
address
there's,
that.
okay, sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me.
Yeah,
so I don't
no,
know
I
if it's done
understand.
or not done.
It kind of fits in with the next steps, but we'll,
Perfect.
we'll
And then
get-
the thing that fitted for me with the previous person, just on a big level, if we're as a citizen redoing our landscaping and not like a renovation on our house or anything, my thought is we still needed to go and get town approval for some things. Just, you know, I've been here only since 2013, is that right? And does that impact? Like, this whole process is only for when you have additional houses?
Yeah, so we're only recommending the adoption of code provisions that would impact renovations and then modification of the existing code provisions for both for new houses and then the new provision. for renovation.
Okay, that's fine. It can still inspire us, but when I do a landscaping, I imagine if I have a big wall or whatever, I will apply, or cutting trees, I will apply to the town anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens? Do they look at all of my drainage system and all of this? That's like the question it's a big unknown. And I think that, you know, I'm wondering at a big level why we're not going there.
Well, maybe that's something that we would want to consider in the future. I think our primary focus now was on, with respect to the code, is the construction of new impermeable surface.
Okay.
Because that's the contributor.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, next slide. Matt, next slide. Matt, are you there?
This was the next slide. Do you need me to keep
Oh,
going forward?
Oh, okay. Sorry, thanks. So before we talk about the next steps, what I wanted to kind of look at is what has been going on in the past in Somerset as it relates to stormwater, and kind of go through the history a little bit. So the Environment Committee studied the issue in 2008 and 2009. The town installed several rain gardens, and the county installed a bioretention swale that were all on public land. And over the years, the town has added drains and pipes on private and public land. Next. This information comes mainly from the survey that we did, where we got over 50% of the residents in Somerset to participate. Our conservative estimate is that over $3 million has been spent collectively as people attempt to solve stormwater issues on their private property. We also determined, reading all the comments and asking people questions, that actions people have taken have often adversely impacted their neighbors, often unknowingly. And then finally, only 19% of the people had reported that they had actually solved their problems. So 80% of the people are not solving their problems. Next. So why is stormwater still a problem? Well, water flows from yard to yard downhill. Dealing with the water where it originates is less expensive and more effective, and we're really not doing that. Also, uphill changes have downhill ramifications. Everything that's done above you is going to have an impact. For instance, if trees are cut down, if there's construction, if somebody puts in a berm or some other kind of structure, or changes their landscaping, different kinds of downspouts and where they're directed, these all will impact people who are downhill. And as we all know, storms, because of climate change, they're intensifying. So things are not going to get better. They're going to get worse. And also, from going through the surveys, it doesn't appear that there's a lot of maintenance going on with the infrastructures that have been put in place. And I think a lot of people, they don't even know that you need to have inspections, because dry wells and permeable pavers and a lot of these infrastructure, they don't last forever. Just like you have maintenance on your house. If you want these structures to work, they need to be inspected. Next. So the concept that we think is really important is working together for the common good, and that instead of everybody individually trying to solve their own problem, neighbors can work across property lines to solve runoff problems. And one of the things I was thinking about today is, if there were no houses on Somerset and a developer came and was looking at, putting houses up and saw the water, what would that developer do? The developer wouldn't go to the bottom of the hills and put in, drains and rain gardens and all that kind of stuff. They would try and deal with where the water is accumulating and how it flows. When we developed a plan, it was incorporated not only working together, but also knowing that everyone's not an expert. And we can see that tonight people want to do something. And as we visited homes, a lot of times people say, I want to do something, I just don't know what to do. That we would work to provide some technical expertise and a facilitator who can work with residents within some of these mini watersheds that we have identified through LIDC and through our survey as having severe runoff issues. And also the idea would be that financial incentives would be provided in order to get citizens to basically do the right thing. So if you're a person whose property, you don't have a problem, but water is flowing off of your property, so your neighbors have problems, we would try and get the town to provide a financial incentive to get that homeowner to deal with the runoff on their property. As you all know, the town applied for ARPA funds last year, and one of the uses designated by the federal government was for stormwater runoff projects. And we did get the money. And so part of using that money to basically help the community as a whole, we thought would be a good idea. And that the town council obviously would make the considerations after a proposal was put together to see whether there is enough people in that particular, we call them cluster or mini watershed, wanted to come together, that they were going to have, skin in the game, that they were also going to put up funding, and that there would be some incentives to try and get some of the neighbors who perhaps would be normally would be likely to deal with it, to actually try and control the runoff on their property. Next. And in terms of trying to figure out who would get funding, we looked at some different criteria. The first is that we would have priority for watersheds with significant drainage problems. And that's pretty easily identifiable based on the survey. We also know, which houses responded and said that they were having a lot of, their yards were perpetually wet. They had water in their basement. And we also calculated whether they had spent money. And then we had LIDC also look at all the GIS information and paired that so that we can look at within a little watershed, and we know whether that is a significant drainage area. And again, the other criteria would be participation. I mean, people have to come together and say, yes, indeed, we want this. And also we looked at past expenditures by homeowners, which is a very good indication. And when I sort of ran the numbers between where people had spent significant amount of money and where the problems are based on both the GIS, it's almost 100% correlation. Next. And of course, we need transparency and accountability. So the project manager, somebody keeps sending me questions. The project manager would report regularly to the town, and reports will be made public. The town will maintain records on installations, monitor efficacy, and ensure maintenance as part of green infrastructure inspection program recommended by the committee. And then town will also continue to seek additional revenue for projects. And, we understand that this, we're hoping this will go on beyond this particular year. And we know that we need to seek other sources of funding, and which is why one of those ideas was to collect money if people were given a variance and they were creating runoff, to have some kind of one-time fee, which could potentially go into this fund that would fund future work. Also, LIDC on our behalf is applying for a grant that could, if successful, could also bring us additional revenue. And the other point that I want to make is, which I do think has been made a couple times, is that we're at the forefront. Somerset's at the forefront of this. And I think if we can be successful and stay with the program, I think we're going to find that other people not only are going to follow us, but there will be a lot of sources of revenue in the future. Next. Okay, are there any questions? Hello? Okay, I'll read the questions.
I saw a couple of people. I don't know if they popped up for you or not, but I'm happy to pass them along if not.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Probably easy if you're doing it and I can answer the questions.
Okay, sure, no problem. I think one person had a question at the last question section, so it might be jumping back a little bit, but Ann Bolton, I don't know if you're still here.
Just go ahead with it. And
yeah, sorry, I'm here. I'm just on mute. Sorry. I was just asking a question about the trees, so I don't want to derail the current discussion. I can ask it at the end.
Okay.
This, well, I don't want to speak for the committee, but at least as far as slides go, this was the last Q&A section, so might be also useful for anybody out there listening to know that if you do have a question, now's the perfect time to ask them. But I think Ann's question, which she sent to me, was in the report, the committee noted that about 20% of trees that were removed in town were part of construction projects. And she just wanted to get a sense of what the other 80% of tree removals were, and if the committee gave any thought to replacement of trees and how to address that.
Ellen, do you want me to take that? Or?
Yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Sure. I'm Julie Abrams, not Julie Greenberg, a committee member. Thanks for your question, Anne. So I'd say it's multi-point. I think one of the reasons we wanted to explain that the majority of tree loss wasn't due to construction is our sense was the impression in town was the majority of the reason for tree removal, and the facts showed that wasn't the case. So tree removals happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes it was construction. There were also dead and diseased trees which were removed, and any tree removal had to be approved by the town arborist. Then there were trees that were asked to be removed that were healthy, that did not have to do with construction, such as on an existing home. So those were a number of the reasons. Also, there was a number of tree removals or pruning and removals by Pepco. As those who've lived here longer knew, we had tons of power outages. And so there was that. So there was really a number of factors. All of those contributed. There was a town rule until recently. We have new town code about trees that you had to, if you remove 3, you had to have a reforestation plan. However, there was no oversight to ensure that those trees were replanted, or there was that replanting. We're a small town, has been emphasized, and there really just hasn't been any system to monitor that. So we really don't know if that took place or not. There is new town code. Matt can probably tell you the new date. It was not proposed by our committee. There's the Parks and Natural Resources Committee that relates to both tree removal and reforestation, which I would say is probably more stringent and more nuanced than our prior requirement, that because now it's any tree removal has to fit within the code. I think that code is beyond our scope. But just to answer your last question about it, is that our mandate, because we're focused on stormwater, wasn't as much focused on reforestation. And that really was the purview of Parks and Natural Resources Committee. We were very much talking, the two committees, but that was really kind of their lane and not ours. But there is new code. Matt or anyone can tell you where to find it if you'd like to know more. I hope that answers your question. Thanks. Over.
Yeah, just to tack on to that very quickly, except in the cases of emergencies now, trees, instead of measuring by the number of trees, it's by the total diameter of trees that are proposed to be removed, and beyond what essentially amounts to one healthy tree. Once you get to that total diameter, it does require a permit and a reforestation plan.
And I would just add that there has been over time tree canopy loss. That was in our last report. You can look at that overall in Somerset. And that there is certainly a role for trees in absorbing water, both from when the water falls down to slow it and absorption of the roots. That's also in our final report. Thanks.
The next person who indicated that they had a question was David Cathan.
Hi, and I have a question in regards to the town has a building engineer to review building plans. Did the committee consider recommending the town hire its own stormwater management engineer to review plans? And I have also a second question, which I don't know if this is the time to do it, about the graphic that was put up on, showing a stormwater, bioswale, I think it was, down south side of Dorset. I'm just wondering, is that part of a money that town would spend, or that would have to be spent by a town member, residents along that stretch of Dorset?
Why don't I take the second part of that question, and then somebody else on the committee can answer the first part. So after we had done the survey, and after we had visited many properties, we realized that we were over our heads in terms of engineering capabilities. And so we requested that the town council hire LIDC so that we could have some engineering expertise. And knowing that we had sort of identified what we had called clusters and what they ultimately were calling mini watersheds, and identifying where the worst parts were in Somerset, our goal was to have them go around to several areas to go talk to homeowners, to get on their property, and to write up some, mitigation plans about what would they do, how should these people work together to fix the problem in their area as the water is rushing from home to home to home, downhill. So they were able to do 4 plans. One wasn't completed because they weren't able to get into the backyards and to actually see where the water was coming from. And these are, plans where they visited the site, they talked to the homeowners, and their best ability was to kind of say, well, these are the things that you could do. And then as the council was looking at the budget for next year, they had said, do we have any ideas about, what these kind of mitigation projects would cost? And so, we did look kind of back of the envelope, but fairly, I think, accurately look at what these projects would cost on 4 very different areas of town. And, they ranged from a total of about, I think 58,000 to the one on Dorset was a couple $100,000, which we felt could be altered and didn't have to be quite as extensive. That doesn't mean that the town would pay the bulk of the price of these programs. It's that they would get people together, work with them, maybe, and have some incentives for people to participate, particularly the people who are, generating the runoff. So it's not a final plan or anything. It's just sort of a starting point. Did that answer your question, David?
Yes, I have some more detailed questions about, looking at the report, but that cannot happen right now. So
Okay.
maybe we can have a chat later on.
You had a first question. What was that?
It was about hiring a town stormwater engineer.
Julie, do you want to take that? Julie Greenberg?
She's on mute. You're on mute.
Julie, you're
Julie
on
Greenberg.
mute.
I'm on mute now. We didn't make any staff recommendations. I think we definitely suggested the types of analyses that have to be conducted, especially to provide guidance. And we recommended that there be a communication when there's a comprehensive code change that affects builders and applicants, that there be communication by town staff very early on so that applicants are conversant with the code. And I think implicit in all of that is that we think the town staff should be competent to discharge and the responsibilities that are inherent in communicating that. So we didn't list qualifications, but I think what has to be done and why, the rationales, should create the expectations. And we hope that the town, finds a consulting staff that can perform at that level.
Yeah.
I will just note, David, that Doug Lohmeyer, who serves as the town's engineering consultant currently, he serves on the water board for the town of Chevy Chase. So he does have experience and expertise in the area of stormwater.
Yeah, I will also add that when we were writing this report, we looked extensively at the town of Chevy Chase, and in their process, they contract with a stormwater engineer who, the town of Chevy Chase hires, and it's a very collaborative process between the builder and the standard, and the stormwater engineer is there to sort of make sure that the engineer and the architect hired by the builder meet the standard. But the standards aren't that complicated. Like, as Julie says, they're sort of, if you're going to build X amount of more impervious surface, you want to capture the water. And here are X kinds of suggestions that's sort of a known stormwater best practices. So, if the town got rich and wanted to hire its own stormwater engineer, that's not out of the question. And other towns have stormwater engineers at their disposal. But as Matt has said, our town engineer does so in town of Chevy Chase. They approve a plan, and the town engineer and the builder can't agree. They appeal to something, unfortunately, called the water board, and Doug does sit on that water board. So we're not without any expertise on stormwater engineering. Longer answer, sorry.
Okay, any other questions, Matt?
Yes, circling back to Phil Young.
Okay, hi, thanks very much. Ellen, I think you started to answer my question actually, and that's one of my fundamental questions is what's the source of the $300,000 that has now been approved by the town council for stormwater management? Because I read the final report, all 78 pages, and I didn't see any numbers about costs. So I was wondering, what's the technical background expertise to justify that number? Maybe it sounds like it's, well, the town can afford to allocate 300 and then you'll figure out how to spend it. But it's just not.
I don't think that's particularly accurate.
Okay.
So, I think we've spent a year and a half at this. We have extensively researched. We have polled and done a survey of homeowners. We've gone and visited properties. We've hired LIDC. We know where the problems are, and we know where the problems are that can't be solved by homeowners alone, because our, proof here is that people are not able to solve the problem on their own. So the question is, what are we going to do? So we, it was a very tight time and the budget was coming up. The alternative was to do nothing and not put anything and not have the town have any money in the budget to address stormwater for the next year. Or we could do our best effort, and we had these mini watershed plans, and we priced out the plans to find out what the amounts of money were, not necessarily for those, but that we got an average, because they do, go up and down. But did we do the whole entire town and find out, what it would cost? That would have been impossible to do in the 2 weeks that we had to prepare this. But I feel very confident and very strongly that this is a sound plan. This was not taxpayer money also. This is money that was designated for stormwater by the federal government that we obtained. And I think the council is very foresighted in trying to deal with it, because it's a very important issue to a lot of homeowners, and they are at a point where they've put in their money and nothing's changed. So that's what, I guess, how I would respond.
So just to make two follow-up points on that. I was just saying that it would have been nice if the final report contained some of the information that you were talking about the costs of these projects, these swales through multiple homes properties, to justify the 300,000 that's currently in the budget for fiscal year 23. The final report didn't provide any of that technical background. That's my point.
Those are in the final report. Those,
The
not the budget.
$300,000?
No, the plans are.
The plans are, but not the cost.
Right.
That's my point. The second point is regarding ARPA funds, just to be clear, ARPA funds are for the town to use for designated uses, as you pointed out, but it's not just the stormwater.
I didn't say it was just stormwater.
No, I know you didn't. And so what I'm saying is the council has to then decide the priorities, and this is a council decision, because there are other uses that the ARPA funds could be used for, such as road resurfacing, LED lighting, repairing the pool. There's a lot of other uses. In the 5-year plan that the town has right now, they've put in, the mayor has indicated, this is not approved by the council. It's not a committed budget number. It's just an indication. But over the 5-year plan, there's $1.1 million over the 5 years for stormwater. And that's equivalent to virtually the entire ARPA grant being used for stormwater. And also, last question is, it wasn't clear to me, again, from the final report or from tonight's discussion, how much of that money is going to be used for projects that are on public land only, and how much is going to be used for projects that are on private properties?
Well, because it has, when you're doing a budget process and you have, a time limit, you can't determine every single cost. And but the idea is if you don't allocate any money, nothing is ever going to get done. I think these numbers are very reasonable. You know, I think it would make a big difference within the town. And I think if, you know, if the council decides that they want to move forward, you know, it's not going to be money that's wasted. I'm not suggesting that there aren't other, you know, priorities in town, but, you
No,
know.
I'm all in favor of stormwater management, but my question was, how much of that money is going to be allocated to projects that are on private properties? And how much is going to be allocated to projects that are just on public lands? Do you have some idea of that?
Well, I think the town has done what they can do pretty much on public property. I think the problems are on private property.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that should be the priority. They've already done things with the different, you know, rain gardens and, you know, at the pool and around the town hall. I'm not saying there's not other things that they can do, and maybe there is some more things to do, but I think you've got to address what's going on private property and use some of these funds that are public funds for the, you know, betterment of all and for the community, because what we have been doing is not working. And you can dust off the plan from 20 years ago, and we could put our plan back in and someone can dust it off 20 years from now and nothing's going to change. At some point, you have to put one foot in front of the other and do something.
Yeah, let me make one follow-up point to Ellen's response, David. We, the committee, were tasked with coming up with a plan to recommend to the town council and to the mayor that we thought would be effective in addressing the very serious stormwater runoff problems we have in the town of Somerset. And that's what we've done. We've done our job. And that included making recommendations with respect to the town code. It included providing a lot of information to the town about available resources to homeowners that they can help themselves. And it included coming up with with the project that Ellen has and the program that Ellen has described. This is a critical part of it. And it's critical, particularly because of the point that I made. The limitations, the code impact on construction is entirely forward thinking. We could regulate new construction in the town of Somerset so that there wasn't another drop and one extra drop of stormwater runoff on a neighbor's property or in the street or in the storm sewer. And still we would have serious and growing problems, stormwater problems in the town. This is the one recommendation that we have made to the town. And it's up to the town ultimately to decide how much it's going to appropriate. We don't make that decision. That actually address that if implemented will actually reduce the stormwater problems that we have in this town that are serious. This is it. This is the way to do it. Someone else may come up with a better idea, but so far no one has, and we think this is a good idea. Ultimately, it's up to not us, but the town to decide whether to appropriate the funds. What we've done is make a recommendation consistent with our mandate.
I agree. I mean, I think ultimately it is up to the town. It's also.
We have three other questions, so just in deference to other folks that are have their hands up. David Batson.
Yes. As a private landowner, I'm just looking at the location of various devices that would be able to put in, be they dry wells, et cetera. Given that a number of the lots have runoff of roofs that are currently piped as they were originally set into the street, are there any considerations that have to be taken into account regarding the town's easement on the edge of the streets? Was there's a 14-foot easement, 11-foot easement from the curb back? I know that sets off for fence lines, et cetera, where the town has some control over that particular piece of land. Has the town thought about that as an area for various ways to deal with runoff from yards that are hitting the street right now? Or are there considerations that I, as a private citizen, need to take into account when considering, for example, putting in a rain garden in that particular area up against the curb?
Julie, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think there's a 10-foot right of way that in some cases might be a place that there could be some investment by privately or, and I don't know that the town would have any objection. We didn't really deal with that. One of the issues is the nature of the problem that we were looking at was more the impact in backyard, sort of neighbor to neighbor.
Back property
And-
lines.
And I will say that water quality issues in waterways is a big problem. But if you're dealing with water runoff near the curb into the street, we do not have streets flooding and backing up into yards causing problems. So that had to be sort of lower on our list of consideration, as Ed mentioned, because we're trying to deal with this $3 million problem or a $3 million misinvestment in the town.
Right.
And so, I just think that just sort of was just lower, but it's certainly, I think there's potential there when we get to the margins of where we should be working in town to improve the drainage problems and the water quality issues, that is in there. I absolutely agree with you, David.
Okay, no, thank you. No, the same issue over on Uppingham, the back property line drainage issues at the bottom of the hills tend to be the most extreme.
Yes.
And one we'll have to be looking at as neighbors in this area for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to go to Ann. I think Ann Bolton has her hand up.
Yes, thank you guys. First of all, thank you guys for what is a really great, thorough report. I really appreciate it. I wanted to just say one point further to what Phil Young mentioned, which is just, I think Phil's question, because I also serve on the budget committee, is just the conversation at the last town council meeting was very strongly about putting $300,000 into this fiscal year budget for stormwater management, as opposed to putting it into a special capital fund until specifics were defined around how these grants might get allocated. So I just think that there's a little bit of a disconnect, not because anybody's against stormwater management or doing everything possible, but I just think there's a disconnect between that process of how that actually would happen, and then how the budget, what is reflected in the budget. And I just think that that's an important thing to point out. The second thing, I thought I saw in one of the earliest slides that you guys presented was that there was something about public stormwater drains or public way stuff. And somebody I thought made the comment that there was an insufficient number relative to the size of our town. So I think the other part of it is, were there any of these sort of public infrastructure areas that you guys thought could benefit from more investment from the town? And maybe that's just not realistic now that the town is fully developed. Thanks so much.
I would say one thing, which as everybody probably knows, there's been a big problem on Little Cumberland, and those folks have been getting water from Drummond for years, and there is a drain there, and I think the part of the plan kind of expands that. I mean, not only this is just one of the proposed plans, but creates sort of bioretention structures in the back of yards. And also there is a drain already there. And I think it would also, if we use some public money, I think it also would go for different, I think, curb cuts and also some piping, underground piping. So it's kind of public-private. It's hard to separate a lot of times because it's private land, but the drains and some of the piping was put in by the town or in the county in the past. And then I don't know what the other part of your question was. I think it was.
I was just making the point about the budgeting process and sort of how those grants would get allocated.
Yeah, I think that's really a question for the town council, not really for the stormwater committee. Are there any more questions?
See, Veronique has her hand up still.
Yes, I do. And part of it, I think, has been answered. So I leave. Again, I want to thank you guys and I apologize. I intended to read the whole report and it didn't happen today. So the day got, other volunteer work got to me. But one other thing that I'm puzzled with when I leave the meeting is one of the reason I've not been acting is like in a worry that I wouldn't do it properly. And, someone mentioned that, of the people that tried to do something, and I did not answer your survey, was that 80% of them said it was not working. So I kind of leave the meeting still a little worried, and somehow the technical part that leaves behind me, and I'll do my own research, I'll go through all of the papers, is like those mini watershed that you have identified to your resources. If they're in the report and I can find them, it's all fine. Otherwise, where do I go? Because I want to make sure, I actually think that there is a mini watershed, and maybe Jeffrey, I know that there's a story of water coming all the way to your house, but I'm 2 houses up. But we want to do better, and I don't know if I'm part of these watershed. And really what I want to do is, before I do anything, am I supposed to really work with my neighbors? And that question is, I don't want to make the same mistake for sure, because it's too expensive.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And I found that in visiting neighbors' yards during storms, I actually filmed that one piece of video, is that people really don't know what to do. And that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to identify the worst areas and give people help and get them in touch with some experts to develop a plan. The reason I think that people are failing is because you cannot isolate it and just deal with what's on your property if you've got rivers heading towards your property. And if you're then dumping on your, because a lot of people are just saying, I have all this water coming on, what am I supposed to do? I have to get rid of it too. It's coming to me and now I'm going to get rid of it. Until we deal with the whole thing in the mini watershed with a comprehensive plan, I think people will invest their own money and because people want to know, what can I do? And we do have all the resources. If you want to just email me too, I can check. And
I will totally, because we are away a lot. We have water. I mean, we never took picture and never got involved. We just know the problem is there. We're engineers ourselves, but we're like, oh my God, and it's been worse since we've moved here. Our lot is eroded, but we just, we're like, okay, everywhere I start, it's not going anywhere. But now what I find extremely interesting is your effort to put public land with private land and, kind of joining us. And, again, if you haven't looked at our area, we'll take the time to look at it. I mean, it doesn't have, it's brutal when the water comes down, but it doesn't have to be done tomorrow. Somehow I have the most hardscape in town. Because this was a house sold with supposedly 7 places for cars. I have bikes. Everybody that knows me, I probably have, that many bikes. So.
Okay, well, thank you. So just, you can contact Matt if you don't have my,
I'll find it. Email. I'll find it. Thank you.
I think we should probably wrap up here. But thank you. I just want to say that I think if there's one point I've been trying to make, and other people on the committee have been trying to make, is that we've tried individually to solve the runoff problems in the town of Somerset, and it really hasn't worked. And I think now's the time to work together to address this problem collectively. And finally, I really want to thank the committee members. We've been together for over 1.5 years now, and the work I think everyone has done has really been extraordinary. And I personally really appreciate the support everybody has given me, and also would like to thank both the town council, the mayor, and Matt for all of their help and support. I'm, hoping that Somerset can really become a model for, not only Montgomery County, but the state and beyond. And the fact that we're having so many communities reach out to us to see what we've done, they've heard about us, I think gives us an opportunity to, really not only change things here in Somerset, but change things, in our whole state. So anyway, that's all. I don't know if anybody else on the committee has anything to say, but that's all I have. And I want to thank everybody for spending the time to come tonight virtually, and also for those of you who've read the report. That's amazing. So anyway, thank you all, and have a good night. So that's it.
Thanks, everybody.